Today I'm going to tell you a story. It's a story about a pop-up restaurant, which given this venue actually seems quite fitting. A pop-up restaurant called WastED. But first, a little background. I'm going to cover about 14 years of history in about 5 minutes. Blue Hill Restaurant in New York City was opened in early 2000 by the chef Dan Barber and his brother and sister-in-law, David and Laureen Barber. The inspiration and the namesake for this 55-seat restaurant in Greenwich Village in Manhattan was Blue Hill Farm in the Berkshires in western Massachusetts. Dan and David's late grandmother's farm where they spent their summers as children. Blue Hill Farm has a small dairy operation. There's a herd of about 24 mixed breed cattle. And also they produce chickens, goats, beef, laying hens, pigs, and a small amount of vegetable production as well. From the outset, Blue Hill's menu in the city was farm-driven. And the restaurant was open to celebrate local agriculture in the Hudson Valley region of New York. In the spring of 2004, Blue Hill at Stone Barns opened within the Stone Barns Center for Food and Agriculture in Pocatello Hills, New York. The 75-seat restaurant is housed in a converted dairy barn on what was the farm of the Rockefeller family estate in Westchester County. The Barbers helped create the philosophical and practical framework for the Stone Barns Center for Food and Agriculture, which is only 30 miles outside of Midtown Manhattan, New York City. Blue Hill at Stone Barns and the Stone Barns Center is an experiment. It's a collaboration and a dialogue between a farm, a restaurant, and an education center. I'm going to cut forward about 10 years now. Dan wrote a book called The Third Plate. Much to a lot of people's surprise, it wasn't a cookbook. It wasn't even about a particular plate of food or the third course in a lengthy tasting menu. Rather, it was about a metaphor for a different way of eating that informs the menu generally and dishes specifically at both Blue Hill restaurants. It reflects rather than just local or organic or grass-fed, but rather an agricultural system that truly preserves the land sustainably. It could be defined as a pattern of eating that can support a landscape and a food system. If the first plate, if you will, was the archetypical American dream dinner of a big corn-fed steak with some vegetables, some peas and carrots and potatoes on the side, that was the first plate. If the second plate was the organic grass-fed version of that same plate, then the third plate tosses that whole paradigm out the window completely, questioning the sustainability of a half-pound steak sitting front and center of your dinner plate in the first place. Take, for example, a dish that we call the rotation risotto, the dish that we feature occasionally at both of our restaurants. It's a riceless risotto featuring a suite of grains, legumes, and vegetables grown by one particular grain farmer in upstate New York, a guy by the name of Klaus Martens. And these are all grown in pursuit of great-tasting emmer wheat. That's what he is going after. The reason we covet Klaus's emmer wheat for our whole wheat brioche that we feature on our menu is because of a series of soil-building crops that Klaus chooses to grow before growing the emmer wheat. He may choose to grow in a rotation, either in succession or sometimes simultaneously, spelt or clover, corn, mustard, followed by some legumes, soybeans or kidney beans. He may grow millet or rye. He may choose to grow broccoli or buckwheat, and again follow it with some legumes before he grows the emmer. Unfortunately, the bulk of the crops that are grown as part of his Emma rotation were going to livestock feed, which isn't very profitable for Klaus or his farm compared to what he could be getting for those crops for human consumption. There is a market, but it isn't very efficient. It converts them into feed, which then gives us meat and dairy products. Which begs the question, why not just cook with them in the first place? If we want our whole wheat brioche and we want to bake with his Emmer wheat, then we also need to cook with the crops that he grows to create that Emmer wheat. The third plate, then, is an attempt to move away, in the example of Klaus, from treating the farm like a supermarket where we cherry-pick the ingredients that we want, in this case, Emmer wheat. Rather, it's an approach to cooking holistically with a farming system in a way that our choices as chefs promote a sustainable approach to agriculture. If the third plate concept was a very natural evolution of Blue Hill's cuisine, then WastED, the pop-up, was a very natural evolution of the third plate. In fact, I would argue WastED is perhaps the clearest embodiment of the third plate idea. This idea that we need to seriously rethink the architecture and origin of what lies on our dinner plates, and also how we derive value from the food system at large. So what exactly is WastED? By definition, WastED is a community of chefs, farmers, fishermen, distributors, processors, producers, designers, and retailers working together to reconceive waste that occurs at every link of the food chain. Our goal was and continues to be to celebrate what chefs do every day on their menus and what peasant cooking has actually done for thousands of years, creating something delicious out of the ignored or uncoveted and inspiring new applications for the overlooked products of our food system. In its physical incarnation, WastED was a pop-up restaurant that we opened in the existing space of Blue Hill Restaurant in New York. Rather than popping up in a remote location, which is how it's usually done when you open up a pop-up, we actually decided to close our New York location and reopen it as a reimagined and redesigned space for 3 weeks. WastED New York came out of a very innocuous email that I had sent to Dan. I just read a small piece about Brothel, which was Joost Bakker's revolutionary and now sadly shuttered food waste pop-up in Melbourne. Brothel was built around the idea of gathering leftover bones from all the top restaurants in Melbourne and converting them into rich broths, which form the basis of the menu. The idea intrigued me, and my first response was, this has a very third plate feel to it. I emailed Dan, and his first reaction was, we should do a pop-up concept dedicated to food waste. Not only that, but we should do it out of Blue Hill, New York. On the surface, his response came as quite a surprise to me. Close our busy Manhattan restaurant for a few weeks and replace it with a pop-up serving of all things food waste and food byproduct. Pretty risky. Yet at the same time, his response actually didn't surprise me at all. We had been actively cooking waste-inspired dishes for some time in both locations. We were obsessed with finding delicious ways of using fibrous kale stems, which we did, and we were already carbonizing leftover bones after we make stocks, carbonizing the bones, and then cooking over that bone charcoal as a source of fuel and flavor. In the spirit of the third plate, we were already interested in what the farm had to offer that wasn't making it to the market, the rotation risotto being a great example. But what happens if we had to look beyond the farm to the larger food system? What products in the larger context of food production were we missing out that weren't making it to the market? Actually, the idea of zero-waste cooking in the kitchen is as old as the concept of cooking itself. Historically speaking, food waste was never an issue because you simply didn't waste anything. From the earliest peasant cuisines onward, whole animal, whole vegetable, in fact, whole farm cooking was the only way one did cook. The idea of discarding fish bones or cauliflower leaves or kale stems simply didn't exist. In subsistence cultures, you ate everything and you developed a cuisine that reflected that. Unfortunately, this is a concept that we've gradually moved away from. As a culture, we tend to think of these ingredients as waste because we've never had the need to use them. This is actually a historical issue for us back in America. Our ancestors arrived in America to virgin soil and plentiful rainfall. So we were blessed with an abundant agricultural landscape. Unlike peasant cuisines from around the world, we've never really had to eke out sustenance from the land. We've always had enough to go around and then some. Once Dan had made up his mind that we should pursue this idea of opening up the waste-inspired pop-up and close Blue Hill for 3 weeks, the challenge became, okay, how the hell are we going to do this? Where do we even begin to start? The obvious and simplest way was to look within our own kitchens to see what waste we were generating and what items we had that potentially had value that we weren't fully mining. We knew that while we were pretty thrifty in the kitchen, we would definitely have some products to work with. And we also knew that we could always rely on the farm at Stone Barns and Blue Hill Farm as well. What we realized very early on, however, was that if we truly were going to create a menu around discarded or underutilized products, we would have to dig a lot deeper into the food chain and look at the whole continuum of food production to determine where there would be a potential source of lost culinary value. So we worked backwards and asked ourselves, how are we going to create this menu? Well, we need some dishes, right, for the menu. But to create the dishes, we need ingredients, right? Well, we aren't even sure what those ingredients are, since we're working with a category of products that we have no idea about. We don't even know if they exist. So to get to the ingredients, we had to ask our suppliers. So we got to work creating a list of every purveyor and supplier we'd ever worked with, which after, at that point, about 15 years of Blue Hill's history, was a pretty extensive list. In my role as the culinary director of Blue Hill, I had seen the ordering and purveyor relations for the 2 restaurants for many years. We have amazing suppliers, and we've developed great relationships with these people. So we approached each and every one of them. We sent out an email, sort of a form letter, with a very simple question. What, in your particular corner of the food industry, are you discarding or not fully utilizing? Basically, just do a quick but thorough waste audit of your operation and let us know what's ending up in the bin. And don't hold back. Be honest with us and don't assume that anything or something doesn't have a culinary value. We'd be the judges of that. As Dan had stated in that email that I found, actually that email was almost 2 years to the day today. I think it was dated November 17th, 2014. As Dan had stated, include the obvious and the outrageous. So we reached out to farmers and bakers and fishermen and dairies and butchers and brewers and cider makers, food processors, retailers, manufacturers, distributors. We left no stone unturned. My initial fear as we approached these suppliers was they would actually be a little bit reluctant to disclose any details about the food waste. I mean, who wants to draw attention to that in the first place, right? Much to my surprise, the response was quite the opposite. Most often, the responses were actually quite cathartic. A sense of relief that somebody was actually taking the time and the interest in what was otherwise deemed unusable. It became apparent pretty quickly that waste generation and disposal was a serious philosophical, logistical, and obviously economic concern. And it didn't matter where along the spectrum of food production or sales or distribution they fell, food waste and byproduct is everywhere, and it's a serious concern. We quickly generated a formidable list of ingredients, if you will. Scraps and peelings from a pickle processor, cartilage and bones from a smoked fish house, screenings from a grain mill, vegetable pulp from juiceries, discarded trial vegetables from seed breeding programs at academic institutions, spent grains from breweries, and cocoa husks from a chocolate maker, to name a few. And of course, plenty, mountains of ugly fruits and vegetables. Added to this list was a healthy supply of waste-fed animals. Pigs fed on skim milk from a butter maker and spent grains from a distillery. Laying hens fed exclusively restaurant food waste. We felt it important to expand the definition of food waste to include waste-fed animals as well. After 2 months of intensive recipe testing and R&D, just how do you make a pineapple core tender and delicious? And what do you do with those mountains of vegetable pulp from the juicery? I'll give you a hint, we made a veggie burger out of it. We opened WastED in the temporarily redesigned space of Blue Hill, New York. We worked with Formless Finder, an architecture and design firm based in New York City that specializes in recycled materials. The existing walls of Blue Hill were covered in remay, a type of row cover used on farms to protect crops from pests and the elements, to protect the crops from waste. The tabletops were actually grown with mycelium, a kind of mushroom, around a matrix of recycled corn fiber. The song list each night, piped into the dining room, were WastED tracks. B-sides and unreleased songs from everyone from Queen to Bruce Springsteen to the Red Hot Chili Peppers. We took this idea of WastED really seriously. We opened with the menu of about 18 dishes, all priced fairly modestly by New York City standards at $15. Yes, we did charge to eat at WastED. And yes, we did pay for all the byproduct and food waste that we worked with. How on earth could we make a case for lost value in the food system if we weren't putting a value on the ingredients? We discovered strange and delicious parts of monkfish heads and fried them like chicken wings. We took scraps and trims from old dairy cows destined for pet food and created a dish provocatively named dog food, pairing it with mashed potatoes with discarded potatoes from Cornell University's agricultural school and seed breeding program. And we found uses for stumps of lettuce left in the field and radicchio heads that otherwise would have been discarded. We invited guest chefs in each night, and pastry chefs, and occasionally mixologists from around the country to run a waste special. After all, what we were doing was nothing new in the chef community. As Dan likes to say, WastED is alive and well in all good kitchens. Last night's lamb shank is tonight's pasta special, lamb ravioli. We as chefs just don't wear it on our sleeves and call it out as waste cooking. It's just what we do. The challenge of bringing the concept to life in a relatively short period of time was numerous. We put this whole thing together in about 3 months. Design, recipe development, menu planning, you name it. If I had to identify the single greatest obstacle, it would have had to have been ingredient supply. What I learned very quickly as we embarked on this project was that food waste exists and there's a lot of it. Capturing it before it gets discarded and getting it into our restaurant kitchen was another story. At all points in the food chain, systems are set up to remove waste or byproduct, and oftentimes those systems are pretty sophisticated and efficient. What we were asking for was a complete subversion of the paradigm. Suddenly, suppliers were being asked to capture, save, and ship what previously had ended up being composted, or worse yet, relegated to a landfill. At a significant price, I might add. As you can imagine, with some of these suppliers, this made their heads spin. A great example is the work that we did with Beldor, a large-scale processor and food distribution company based in the Bronx, New York. We've worked with Beldor for upwards of about 10 years now. They regularly deliver to both of our restaurants. And within Beldor, they have a large division called fresh cuts. Think salad mixes, mirepoix blends, vegetable batons, French fries, coleslaw mix, you name it. And fresh cuts generates literally tons of byproduct each year. A visit to the facility yielded a pantry of amazing usable byproduct. Carrot peelings, celery leaves, pineapple cores, fennel fronds, potato peels, cabbage cores, lettuce butts. However, getting those into our kitchen was another story. Over the course of about 6 weeks, we set up trial deliveries working with their shipping and logistics coordinator in an effort to see if they could capture, pack, and distribute the items when we ordered them. They had to retrain their employees on the processing floor, and of course, suddenly they had to generate SKUs for things that were ending up in bins. Obviously not an easy assignment for a large-scale processor and distributor suddenly to redirect their waste stream from these bins onto a delivery truck. That legwork is how we got from a dumpster, or I think you call it a skip, possibly? Skip, yeah. Full of these vegetable trimmings, to a delivery of neatly packaged vegetable byproduct. The end result, though, was worth it. Here's what we called the dumpster dive salad, as it was listed on the menu. Probably the most popular item on the menu at WastED. The dumpster dive salad and the work that we did with Beldor is instructive for further reasons. Based on their experience working with us, Beldor has created a new division called Sparks, which, if you look carefully, is a nifty inversion of the word scraps. Realizing the culinary and economic potential of the byproduct that they were generating, they are now marketing these items to chefs and other food people in the food industry, and are developing new and innovative uses for these scraps. For example, they're making a soup mix from dehydrated vegetable trim. And they are now, through connections made with Blue Hill and WastED, supplying off-grade usable product and fruit and vegetable trim to Misfit Juicery, a new cold-pressed juice company devoted to sourcing raw materials otherwise destined to landfill and the compost pile. Other collaborations have continued to evolve from WastED. We were approached by Sweetgreen, the rapidly expanding fast casual salad concept in the US, to collaborate on a new menu inspired specifically by that dumpster dive salad. The owners of Sweetgreen ate at WastED about 4 times during the course of the pop-up. Marketed specifically as a collaboration between Sweetgreen and WastED, the salad included kale stems, broccoli leaves, carrot peels, and even anchovy oil, the oil from the tins of anchovy that they were using in their Caesar salad, all generated from their own kitchens. I'm currently working with their culinary director on a new waste salad concept for their 2017 menu. Additionally, Shake Shack featured our juice pulp cheeseburger when they reopened their Madison Square Park, their original location in Manhattan last year. Beyond the outside collaborations, WastED has had a profound internal effect on the workings of our restaurants. In the past 2 years since the pop-up, we have started to look at our own work in a new light, and barely a week passes where we aren't confronted with a new WastED idea. Additionally, our suppliers are now constantly approaching us with new ideas as well. At the end of the day, WastED is an attempt to force us to rethink our system of values when it comes to food and eating. It calls into question the very notion of what is unusable and uncoveted. Specifically, by engaging a community of chefs, we broadcast a message about how a culinary community can bring about a cultural shift about how we think about food waste and producing enough food to feed a growing population. If that message is based on ingredients and dishes that are truly delicious, then great opportunities lie ahead. Thank you.